All right, welcome everyone.
Recording in progress.
I'm just going to give people a second to get in and make sure that they can hear. If you can't hear me speaking, you have an audio problem. All right, let's go ahead and, give me just one second. Just going to change one of my settings here. Okay. Great. All right. So welcome to today's webinar. It's on artificial intelligence tools in higher education. My name is Shelby Lamar. I'm the Associate Director for the Center for Academic and Faculty Excellence here at Claremont Graduate University. What we mainly focus on is helping students, faculty, alumni, and anyone connected with CGU to make sure that they are teaching in an ethical way, in an equitable way, and helping them also get out there on the job market with all of the portfolio items they need. We also offer a certificate in inclusive excellence in college teaching. If you are interested in that, please check out our website, and I'll have the link at the end of the video. So before we get started, I just wanted to say that we are recording this webinar, and we will have the recording available probably in about a week on our website under the events page. I've also turned on captions if you want to follow along with captions or the transcript. And finally, I'll have a poll at the end that's anonymous to give me some feedback on what you thought about the webinar and just to help us understand what everyone's enjoying. So let's get started. So I'm going to get started with just an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. First, I'm going to be talking about some of the general stances on AI that universities and professors have taken. I'm going to be talking about how to craft guidelines for courses in universities, some of the things to consider. I'm going to talk about using AI in assignments, the AI detection tools that are out there, citation issues with AI, and then we're going to have some discussion and questions at the end. If you have questions before the end, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'm happy to address those at the end, or if something really jumps out, we can address it earlier. I also want to tell you, I'm not here with a ton of answers about AI. What I'm actually going to be giving you are a lot of things to think about, because there are no direct answers with AI at this point in higher education. But I want to leave you with a lot of questions to think about how you're going to use it, how your students might potentially use it, and things that are just going to be important to consider in the upcoming semesters. All right. So first, the general stances on AI in higher ed fall into three general categories. We've seen the no use policy, or the ban on all AI. Some universities did a ban across the whole university. Some prevented it from being accessed on their networks. Faculty sometimes are saying you can't use it at all in our classes. We're seeing also a selective use stance, where faculty are saying you can use some tools in our classes, but not others, or they're saying you can use tools on some assignments and not others. So really kind of taking it piecemeal about how they want to handle it. The last one that we're seeing is open use policies. So we're seeing a lot of faculty encourage the unrestricted use of AI, so they can use it in any work or assignments or exams. And so we're going to talk about how each of these have pros and cons connected to them. But before we get into those details, some of the pros and cons, I want to do a quick poll. I want to get your opinions now, and I want to get your opinions at the end of this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. And I'd like for you to answer one simple question. So what would you do in your class as far as AI is concerned? So imagine you have a class next semester and you are redesigning or designing it for the first time. What do you think your stance would currently be on AI use in your class? Would you say there's no use, there's selective use, or there's open use in your class? So I'm just curious about how people are feeling right now. And then we'll also take a feel at the end of the webinar to see if your opinions have changed after hearing some more information about AI in higher education. All right, so 70, oh, we're almost, I'm going to give just another second here. Great. Okay, it looks like most people, 69%, are saying that they are in favor of selective use of AI in their courses. 29% are saying that they would have open use, and only 6% are saying that they would restrict AI in their courses completely. So that's really interesting. And Sarah, if you could just take a note of those numbers for me, I'd appreciate it so we can look at it at the end of the webinar. All right. So let's get into the pros and cons of these stances on AI. So some of the benefits of not allowing any AI use in your classes are possibly having a better understanding of what students' work is their own and what their true level of understanding is. That's a potential, right? It's not guaranteed, but it's a potential. It could potentially level the playing field as far as uniform assessment for all students, especially if some of the students don't have access to AI tools. The AI tools are an equity issue at this point because many of the AI tools have free versions, but the paid versions are much better. So if students potentially have access to paid versions, they could potentially have equity issues compared to other students in the class. Another benefit is it avoids over-reliance on technology for academic tasks. So that is something that would be a benefit for no use of AI. However, there are also costs, and there's more than just 3 benefits and costs, but for the sake of the shortness of the webinar, this is what I decided 3 would be enough for each one. So let's see. The missed learning opportunities is a cost of not having any AI in the classroom or at the university. So, students may miss out on the benefits of the AI tools, learning to use it, learning how it can integrate into their field. They also might have resistance to technology. So it might deter students from really trying to figure out how technology is impacting their field. And then one of the costs is that not using AI results in an increased manual workload, especially in some fields. So repetitive tasks might take longer than if they potentially used AI. And so they could not focus as much on those deeper learning tasks. There's also something that I didn't put in, but I want to mention is there's a monitoring challenge of trying to decide if students are using AI, if you decide to ban it completely. So this is something to consider as well. So what are the pros and cons of a partial use policy of AI? One of the benefits is it's a balanced approach, kind of allows students to gain insights from AI while having some assignments or assessments kind of locked down so that you are sure that it's the student's own work. You can develop specific skills that you think might be lacking if you allow AI on assignments or exams. And then finally, it can be adaptable. So this stance really allows you to adjust based on your particular course, the specific needs of the students that are in your course, particular assignments, and what you're actually studying, what your field of study is. However, there are still costs with partial use policies on AI. So for instance, different rules for different tasks or different policies for different assignments or courses can be really confusing for students. So imagine you're a student and you have one course that allows AI completely, one course that allows partial use, and one course that doesn't allow AI. You need to be very careful to make sure that you don't forget which courses those are and make sure that each assignment is following the rules. Also within a class, if you have some assignments that allow AI and some that don't, you might have students that get confused or students that are just having a hard time remembering in general. I know that sounds weird, but you have to remember, especially with undergrad students, they have potentially 5 courses that they're taking at a time, and that's a lot of assignments to keep track of. Another
Shelby,
yeah.
there's a very important question I think that you should address at this point.
Okay.
How do you understand how do we understand or define artificial intelligence tools? Is Zotero one?
I don't consider Zotero one because it doesn't rely on machine learning. But this is something I will also talk about later, is how we define AI in our policies is going to have a big impact on its use and how students see it. So I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, Zotero, I don't consider an AI tool because it's not using machine learning in quite the same way as we would see from ChatGPT or Claude or something like that. But good question. Finally, the monitoring challenge is here as well. You're going to have to monitor to make sure that you're seeing compliance with the specific rules that you've set. Sometimes monitoring is impossible. Sometimes you can. So we'll get a bit more into that as well. So that's kind of the costs. Finally, the open use of AI as a policy. So the benefits is that it really encourages students to explore the full range of what AI tools can offer. It really lets them play and figure out in a safe space that isn't their job potentially, that where they can figure things out in a safe place. It also helps them prepare for the future. With AI being integrated into so many professions at this point, I think familiarity with AI is going to be vital to almost all future careers. And that's something that we need to think about for our students. There's also efficacy and insight. So AI can help, process large data sets, repetitive tasks, complex problems, more efficiency. And what that can do for you is actually leave time for deeper learning in your class. So especially if you're, dealing with upperclassmen, AI can help you get past those repetitive tasks that takes up your students' time and allow for deeper, more critical thinking on some of the more important skills and tasks that you want them to just take on. So some cons are accessibility issues. So ensuring that AI tools are accessible to all students, including those with disabilities, including those that don't have the finances to purchase them or use them. There's also a potential cost of over-reliance. So students might learn to lean too heavily on AI, missing out on critical thinking opportunities or missing out on ways that they can improve their own skills without it. And then finally, potential for misrepresentation. So worrying about if students are citing the AI, if you want them to cite it, and it might be unclear which parts of an assignment were AI assisted or completely the students. So that's kind of the overall pros and cons that I'm kind of seeing come out of these AI policies. And next, I want to take some time to talk about kind of crafting these policies. As we think about these pros and cons, what types of statements are we looking at and how can we write these good guidelines and policies for our courses? So just checking the time here to make sure I'm good. Okay. So first, types of statements that we're kind of in general talking about are university-wide policies. Some universities, I've seen many different responses from universities. Some have banned AI outright in their plagiarism policies and things like that. I'm seeing a decrease in those actually because universities, rightly so, want to give faculty the option of what they want to do in their courses and how they want to teach and what skills they think are important for their students. There's also course-specific guidelines that each faculty member are setting out or a department is setting out for courses. I think this is where a lot of some of the tension is sitting right now as departments and faculty are trying to think about course-specific guidelines. And then there's also assessment-specific guidelines. So guidelines for particular assignments in a course instead of blanket specific guidelines. So for instance, that partial use policies might have guidelines for particular assignments compared to the entire course. So those are also kind of the types of statements to think about. Now, let's think about when we go to craft these statements, either for the university, a course, or an assignment, what we need to be thinking about as we go in and decide how we want to use these in our courses. So first, consider the goal of the assignment and the class. So if, and I would say your field as well. So if the assignment's goal is just remembering information, really on the bottom level of, the hierarchy of Bloom's. You want to really think like, if I'm just having students remember, maybe AI is not the appropriate tool to use for this assignment. However, if I'm wanting them to do a complex task, and that could be everything from writing a research paper, writing an annotated bibliography, or doing data analysis. I'm talking very generally because I'm trying to appeal to all the fields, but really think about aligning the assignment and the class up with what you think students actually need. So if you're teaching classes on coding or mathematics or things like that, in some instances, AI are going to be great calculators. They're going to be the great, great ways to integrate calculations. Also in writing, I think that a lot of writing is going to be done with generative AI in the future. And I'm not saying all of it's going to be produced by generative AI, but seeing it as a tool or, a built-in writing tutor. But what it all comes down to is thinking about what you actually want the students to learn and how you want to measure their learning. So those are things to think about when crafting your statement specifically, but also think about in the future, what skills are students going to need, and how are you making sure that those skills, especially those with AI, are being integrated into your classes. Next, talking about defining AI. When you're thinking about crafting these statements, one of the most confusing things that people are running across is defining artificial intelligence and its use. So for instance, Grammarly has AI built in now. I think it's the paid version, has AI built in. And so it can help students rewrite sentences. It has, that kind of more than just a spell checker and more than just a grammar checker. It actually has like complete suggestions for rewriting. But previously, Grammarly in general would not be considered plagiarism or AI. And so we need to be really specific what we mean when we're talking about artificial intelligence. Are you just saying that your students shouldn't use, generative AI like ChatGPT or Claude? Are you saying that you want to ban all AI? And if you do, what does that mean? What's the difference between Grammarly and that new add-on versus, Word and spell checker? Something else to consider is that there are honestly more AI tools out there than you could ever possibly make a comprehensive list of. So it's also something to think about. Like there's all kinds of categories even. So for instance, Otter AI will sit in on your meeting, take notes for you and transcripts for you, which could be really useful for a group project, right? To help them remember the conversations, to take notes for them. And that frees them up for one person not having to sit there and take notes, for instance. Would you consider that AI? Would you consider that an allowable AI in your class? And so part of the problem with writing these statements is how short can you keep them, but so students don't get bored halfway through and stop listening, but also how do you make a complete definition of AI that is going to be broad enough to handle all the new innovations, but also not just lock everything down, basically. So yeah, but I mean, even if you ban AI completely, you still have to ask the question of what does that mean? I recently saw a university that put out 3 possible statements for faculty to, put in their syllabi. And in it, they didn't have any definition of AI. And as a student, you have to really think like, well, can I use Grammarly? Can I use X or Y or Z? It becomes very confusing on the student's part what's allowed and what's not. And it's going to create some anxiety for students as well because they don't want to be pinged for plagiarism. But at the same time, they want to use the tools that are available to them that they might potentially be missing out on. So the next point, so explain your why when you're crafting these statements. Really think about why you're taking your stance. And if you explain why you're taking your stance to your students, they're going to be much more responsive and much more likely to align with what you're asking them to do. I mean, just like teaching toddlers, like if you tell them why something is going to happen, they're much more likely to follow your lead than just saying, because I said so, right? Explain why you want them to learn a particular skill and you don't think AI is going to work, or why you want them to use AI because you think it's going to be an important skill in their field in the future. So explaining your why is also going to be a really good way to get buy-in from your students. Next, we talked about it a little bit, but consider accessibility. So if you are requesting that students use a particular AI or use AI in general, you might want to consider, who can afford the AI, if it's a paid prescription. Is it accessible to students who might have a hearing impairment or a visual impairment, or not have the latest computer? Like all of these are who might need a screen reader. Any of those things need to be considered when you are considering requiring AI. And there are those that are accessible. I know ChatGPT now has a voice where you can talk back and forth and stuff like that, but just something to be considerate of, especially if you know that you're going to have students that have needs like that. Finally, you need to be continuously updating and reviewing your statements because the field is just exploding with new AI tools and updates and capabilities. Each semester, or I would say even at least midway through the semester, you need to look at the statements you put into your syllabus or at the university and decide, does this still work? Do we need to make changes? I would suggest that you get feedback from your students, see how they feel about the policies. I think one of the important ways as faculty that we can be equitable in what we're doing is being open and honest with students about saying, this is new to everyone. We're still trying to figure out how we navigate this and help them or get them to help you navigate it and see. And I'm not saying just do exactly what they say, but their opinions are very important because they are the ones that are potentially going to be using this in their careers moving forward. And we want to know what they need and what they want from their courses and what we're teaching them. Finally, provide training if you're going to require the some kind of AI. So walk your students through it during class, make sure that they understand the limitations, make sure that they understand, what the AI can do, what it can't do well. And you're not going to cover everything, but at least, also tell them about, like copyright issues and things like that. And we'll go over that in a minute. But your students also need to be aware of that, especially if you are going to require it in any of your assignments. So I'll take a quick pause here. Any questions so far? All right, then I'm going to keep going. So next, I want to talk about AI in assignments. I'm going to give just a brief overview of some of the most common and well-used AI assignments where faculty are integrating them into their assignments or they're integrating them into the course in general. So first, I'm mainly seeing AI being used as a writing tutor. So instead of, I don't know if I advocate for this or how much I advocate for it. I'm still trying to figure it out. But instead of sending students to the writing center, for instance, faculty will have students upload their paper into an AI and have the AI give, a list of suggestions that the student can do to improve, then have the student go and make those changes and explain why the AI suggested those trainings or those updates. And so that gives students the ability to get potentially kind of like peer feedback and things like that, where they don't have to go to appointment and keep going back and forth with an individual person. We're seeing peer review. I think I just mentioned that. So instead of doing in-class peer reviews, where sometimes students feel nervous or anxious because they're having to share their work with other students, although that is an important skill to share your work with others, they're having AI do peer reviews of their assignments and, having students report on the whole process. So take screenshots or copy the text of the whole conversation that they're having with the AI about their work to improve it. People are using it as a debate partner to strengthen students' arguments. So setting up debates, students will debate with the AI on a particular topic, and then having the students reflect on that experience, reflect on what they learned or didn't learn or thought that the AI was wrong about, and then upload all of that into their assignments. We're also seeing, this might be one of my favorite ones, using it as a comparison tool or kind of a critical thinking tool where, so for instance, the professor will give a paper or two papers and say, okay, I want you to do just a one annotated bibliography of this, like a quick summary of this article. And the student will write it and turn that in. And then say, okay, now go put it into ChatGPT, see what ChatGPT comes up with. Or actually, I think it would have to be Claude because of the word limit. Go put this in Claude and see how Claude summarizes it. And then come back and say, why were they different? Was Claude wrong? What did they miss? What did you miss? And really going into that analysis and kind of showing them the strengths and weaknesses of some of the AI systems and how important it is to have, the human element involved. Next is exam practice. So having students sit down with an AI and say, I'm going to take an exam on molecular biology. Keep giving me quizzes on this particular topic. And they'll have students do this kind of practice, then submit the whole practice as a part of their assignment to show, just engagement. And usually these come with reflection pieces to see how the student experienced the practice, if they felt it helped them or not, and trying to get some feedback from students about how it goes. Critical analysis, so really analyzing AI. So having questions posted to AI, the AI will write back. So for instance, just to pick one, critical race theory, right? Having the AI talk about critical race theory, asking it questions, taking those answers, and then writing a paper about how bias might be in the AI system or being represented in the AI system, how that's coming out, what does it fall short on, what does it do well, and really analyzing how the AI system is going. And so those are some of the most common assignments I'm seeing. So I'm going to pause and just, feel free to put in the chat or just to speak out loud. What other assignments have you seen people do? Have you seen or have you done an assignment yourself that you think was very successful in your class?
Shelby, I've heard that some doctors who teach computer science ask them for codes and then correct it. Ask the students to correct the given code that was sent by ChatGPT, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of doing papers and getting feedback on the paper, the student giving feedback on the AI's papers, right? Having the same thing with code. Yeah, we're seeing coding being used a lot with the AI systems, and it's not my specialty for coding or computers in that way, but we're seeing huge shifts in those fields in using AI. So that's a great example.
Also, there was some people with smaller classes, they use AI as a partner. So if you have like a smaller class and you don't have enough, like a lot of people to partner with, this is one idea for them.
Oh, interesting. Like a think, pair, share with AI.
Some sort of think, share, pair with AI with certain prompts, and then you come back, you're ready to give the presentation with your partner, ChatGPT.
Interesting. Those are interesting. Yeah, and I have in the resources a list of other assignments that has been generated just by faculty in general that have volunteered some of the assignments they've come up with for AI in their classes. So take a look at that in my references as well if you're interested in more examples. All right, let's talk about AI detection. So I think what I'm going to say here is unpopular with some people, but I think this is just the state of affairs that we're currently in. AI detection is just, it doesn't work. You can catch some things with AI detection, but there's a lot of problems with it. So the first one is false positives. So you're getting faculty that are accusing students of using AI or plagiarism and cheating, and it's the detector is wrong. And some people are like, I think Turnitin is saying they're at like 4% of they'll get 4% of false positives. And that doesn't sound too bad, but if you have 100 students in your class, that's 4 potential false accusations you could be making in your class. So I really caution using AI detection, software and apps like that, and really relying on it. I also find that just knowing the students' work and reading their work is one of the best ways to see if they're using it. Next, just inaccurate detection in general on the other side. So false negatives. So the students are using AI and it just can't be detected. A lot of the detectors, if you ask, complex questions or work with an output for a few minutes, you can get by most detectors, no problem. As you can see in the screen image here, if you just Google defeat AI detection tools, there's so many videos on YouTube about how to bypass it, basically. And then there is research out as well that these AI detection tools are biased against non-native English speakers. So those that English is not their native language are finding more false positives for this group. I would suspect that there's also going to be more false positives for other groups as well, but I don't have research on hand for that. So that's also something to consider with AI detection. I think, was it Vanderbilt actually decided that their university would not participate in any kind of detection software at all because of the risks of false positives, and instead are coming up with different ways for faculty to, engage with conversations with their students and things like that, because the technology is just not there. And here's a list of some of the most common detectors. So there's Turnitin, Zero GPT, GPT-0, copy leaks, Writer, AI also, OpenAI, so the ChatGPT, the group that made ChatGPT, OpenAI, actually came out with their own detector and then disabled it because it was so inaccurate. So the very people that built ChatGPT have not yet been able to build a detector that can accurately detect ChatGPT in writing. And I think that speaks a lot to just we can't detect it yet. And I think that I would really caution you to use AI detection software in accusing students of things and stuff like that. So take that for what it's worth. One of the other things, oh, excuse me for just a
second. Shelby, while you can conveniently take a drink of water, can you just share a little bit about like what are they detecting? So how can we become human detectors as opposed to relying on the software to do it? What are they looking for in the writing?
So what are the AI detectors looking at?
Yeah, what are they scanning for? And then how does that translate into the human being able to also scan for those things?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And honestly, a little bit beyond me, kind of. So each detector is developing their own ways of detecting. So some of the detectors are based on training algorithms, basically having real text put in that's written by humans, and then saying this is written by a human, and then putting, AI generated text in and saying this is AI and training it using AI in that same way of just training it. And in that case, it's kind of closed behind the doors. We don't know the machine learning process that the AI is taking to differentiate those, right? And there are some patterns that particular AIs have that some of them are trying to detect. But that's kind of the problem with AI in general, is we're not completely sure if they're using like that machine kind of learning what AI is looking at. And that's part of the problem is it's kind of a black box for some of these, so we don't know exactly what they're looking at. But I think as a professor, when I'm looking at students' work and stuff, I'm looking for their voice. And something that is missing from a lot of these AIs is a particular voice that a student has. It's very, I see a couple hands, I'll go to those in just a second. So they're missing that individualized voice. But that part of the problem with how we teach writing right now is not always, but in some cases, we want a very voiceless writing style, right? It's very mechanical and very formulaic in what we want. And that's what the AI is going to be good at pointing out. Okay, I see a couple hands. Clement, I think you had your hand up first.
Okay, yeah, just a little contribution. The explosion in AI, has, brought a lot of challenges in the educational system. And I think faculties needs to, adjust to this new paradigm. And if I happens to be a faculty, I think there are also smart ways that I can handle exams and not give students that opportunity to use AI. Let's say we can use more multiple choice questions, because even most professional exams involves multiple choice questions. With multiple choice questions, critical ones, you can really tell if a student actually reasoned creatively, if he or she gets the answers correctly. And when we use more of essay questions, there is a tendency for students to rely on generative AI because it is essay. But think about if we use, section-timed short essays during exams, that wouldn't give the students that opportunity, to consult any generative AI or any form of AI. When I mean section-timed, the faculty member, the professor have already determined how long it's going to take, for someone who's very smart to answer this question. So it can give the short essays a minute or 2 minutes to answer the question. It wouldn't give the student any opportunity to consult any AI. So I think we also need to be creative and smarter the way, since, there are a lot of ways to beat the AI. We can also outsmart the way we construct questions and test students' creativity. That's what I'm thinking.
I think you bring up a good point. So I think that I completely agree. How we build our assignments, how we build our exams can really be built in a way that we're asking those critical thinking questions and not just those remembering questions that AI is going to be very good at getting. Like, we want a deeper level of understanding from our students, because when they go into their jobs, they're going to have the internet available to them, right? Like, they don't need to remember the very basic things. We want to see them apply those things to what they're using. The only thing I would caution against is, when we went into COVID lockdown, we had a lot of these universities using the software that completely shut down a student's computer, like really locked them out of everything. And there was a lot of the pushback against that, because it was very invasive to the student's computer. It was very hard on the student's computer if they didn't have a more recent version. And it was more likely to ding students of color and students that were it was students of color and neurodiverse students, more likely to say that they had cheated when they didn't. So universities kind of stepped back from using that a lot. So I think like really looking at our assignments, like you were saying, and really making sure that they can stand up to not just a basic, knowledge check is a really great way to go. David, I think you also had your hand up.
Yeah, very brief. I don't want to take up time. I just wanted to point out a lot of folks, colleagues are having in-class writing examples that they can then compare with something that's been produced outside and thus potentially by AI. That's all. Just ways of simply checking on it, but not excluding it and not trying to blame or accuse anyone of anything. Just having a very simple check.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, let me get through a couple more things, and then we'll have more discussion as well. So thank you all for those questions and comments. First, I want to talk briefly about citing AI. So for instance, these are some things to consider when you're doing your own research, when you're talking about students who are going to do their own research, and how you decide to use this in your courses. These are just more things to consider. So for instance, OpenAI's policy is that if you use their system and use their text, you must indicate that the AI generated the text, and it has to be in whatever work that you put out there. Some manuals, style manuals, now have ways to cite AI generated text. So they're expecting that it is now considered a citable source, and they have very different philosophies on this. Like the Chicago Manual of Style says, they're not going to cite ChatGPT in a bibliography unless you provide a publicly available link. MLA says, you shouldn't put in the bibliography because it's not an actual author. But like APA is saying, there's no author, so it should be considered an algorithm output. So you still do the citation and provide like the company name and stuff like that, but you don't cite it as the actual author. So do pay attention to, whatever formatting you're looking at. There are now citation ways to do that in papers. The next thing is copyright issues. So a lot of this generated text and images are going through litigation as we speak. Currently, I believe this is right, the most recent ruling on works of art created by artificial intelligence is that they can't be copyrighted under US law, according to a Washington court. So I believe that's currently still standing right now, but it's ongoing. And if anyone has more information on that, please put it in the chat. And then also journal-specific requirements. We're seeing some journals requiring a certification, so you have to sign when you submit that you did not use AI in any portion of the article that you wrote, or they're asking for citing AI in specific ways. So if you are going to be submitting to journals, also be aware that they might have specific journal requirements, especially if you're wanting to report out, to any pedagogy journals or anything like that, of how you might be using it in your courses, and or if you're using it to code and things like that. Okay, so I'm gonna launch the poll again. I'm just curious to see if anyone changed their minds, if anyone is, or if everyone is still decidedly where they were when we began. So again, the question is, if you had a class next semester that you were designing, would you use it? Would you allow it? So no, some selective use, or open use. So while you go ahead and answer that question, I'm going to open it up for discussion and questions. I prepared a few questions for us to just talk about to get the conversation started if you want. So something to think about is, are you preparing students for new opportunities, methodologies, and skills in their field? How is AI going to shape your field or their field, your students' field, in the next 5 years? Are you prepared for that? And then, are your assignments effectively measuring genuine learning in this age of AI, where students are using it quite a bit? So I'm seeing from the poll, most people are still thinking about using selective use of AI, and about 20% of people are openly going to allow it in their courses. So thank you for filling out that poll. And let's have some open discussion.
I think that AI will take a very sort of clear stance on in our fields. And I think it's going to be as normal as using a Google engine.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people are feeling that way. This is just the next piece of technology, right? We had Google, we've had calculators, things like that. And I do see a couple hands raised. I'm also going to launch the end of webinar poll just to give me a little bit of feedback before people jump off. So thank you everyone for that. So Eric, go ahead. I think you had your hand raised first.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading students' assignments in PFF 531 and learning how they're implementing their own professional views on this for their students. Like you said, to expand on the assignments. I really like how you put the context, because some of the syllabus, as you said, there would be a real use for the students learning, statistics, math. So I look forward to seeing how our graduate scholars pursue this in their learning and their assignments.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few colleagues who are really integrating it into interesting assignments, and I'm excited to hear back from them about how it goes. So I think this is a really evolving field, and I'm really excited to be able to, have these conversations and see where things are going to go. So thank you, Eric.
Yeah, can I speak?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks Shelby for this wonderful opportunity. Recently, I've been researching on AI and trust in higher education, and I have read a couple of papers. I read more than 60 papers already. Because I'm working on a paper on trust and AI in higher education. I realized that the major problem when it comes to integrating AI in higher education, we have a lot to do with the trust, the trust of the higher educators, the teachers, the professors, and those who are administrating higher education institutions. And there are two important factors that played out so much, which is the greatest worry that needs to be addressed. If we have to use AI fully in education in whatever way. First one is transparency. Transparency, especially algorithmic transparency. Many people are not very sure. For the people who are not for open use, their concern is so much about who wrote the algorithms. Understand? How can we trust the algorithms? Even in the learning analytic systems, how can we be sure, this algorithm is actually representing, the truth? So transparency is a very important, and then ethical concerns, which is also related to that transparency. So I think there is need for an integrative ethical framework in higher education. I think we don't have one yet because there is a boom in AI. The more you can catch up with the framework, So, but the transparency and the ethical concerns remains the problem, when it comes to AI implementation in higher education. But I'm exploring other factors. The paradigm shift could also be a problem. Most teachers or higher educators they feel threatened by the presence of this AI because it's acquiring more capabilities by day. People have feared when it's actually going to replace the actual teacher. To what extent of job work should be assigned to a faculty, and how much does AI do? How does those higher education administrators, how do they see the teacher job in the context of the AI? So these are the things we need to look at before we fully integrate the use of AI in higher education. I think for now it should be more of selective. Even if you have a larger pool, it will still be selective. I won't advocate for open usage, not at this time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think that's where most faculty are right now, is they're trying to figure it out. I think most faculty have moved away from like the complete ban. That was the knee-jerk reaction, right? Was like, no, we're just going to ban it outright. We aren't going to use it. And I think more faculty are, and we can kind of see from our poll, is that they're thinking about using it in the classroom in selective ways. And I think we're, as higher education, trying to figure out how that works. And I think there's going to be variations around which field you're teaching in, right? But I think it's actually a really exciting time for faculty and for students to try and figure out how we're going to do this moving forward. I think it's also interesting we're doing this right after COVID and trying to recover from, you know, the COVID emergency switch to online. And now we have this other new technology that's also hitting AI. So I also want to acknowledge, you know, faculty burnout. They're like, I'm tired of dealing with new things. I just want to teach my classes. But I do think this is an important piece that we're going to have to reflect on as faculty to try and figure out how to use it in the best way for our students.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just a thought as you're talking. So I think in higher education in general, folks have been so narrow-minded on generative bots that are pushing out text. And I think that that is just the tip of the iceberg when we talk about these amazing tools. And so I just want people to also consider like the possibilities for animation, video creation, voiceover work. I mean, I think it goes beyond that. And so thinking about how that funnels into the classroom, like you could use it as a way to create more interactive presentations. And then the question is like, are they using it to enhance their demonstration of the knowledge, or are they using it to enhance how it is presented and how understandable that information is? So I think that hopefully we can start to move out of it is only text and into this like more creative realm. But I'm not sure what the implications for courses are with that.
No, I think that's a good point, Chris. I went to an AI summit of business leaders in Southern California a couple weeks ago, and how they're using AI is completely different from how we're seeing it used in our classes. So we're seeing it with them automate systems that used to take up, I think they said 60% of their work, and they're using AI to automate those systems so that they can do more and more work, you know, with less people or less oversight. And they're not using it as text generators. They're learning, what they're using it as is machine learning, right? They teach the machine to do the task over and over again, and then the machine learns it. And those are the repetitive tasks that no one likes to do. But we're also seeing the future is having integrated AI across the board. So Microsoft is looking at AI being integrated across all of, you know, their Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. So you don't have to have as much skill, for instance, in Excel expertise to use those more complex functions, right? And so we're looking at those kind of things. We're looking, yeah, at all kinds of the content creation and like the images and stuff. I've seen faculty assign their students assignments where they have to come up with a metaphor using generative AI like images. And so and the main point was to get the students to think deeply about the metaphors of the particular topic they were working on, and have the students reflect and think deeply, and they have to spend time trying to get this image that they want to come out of the generator, right? So they're also learning how to use it. They're learning what the limitations are. They're also thinking deeply about the topic that they're working on. So I think there's so many options out there for assignments. But I do think faculty are mostly concerned with cheating, which is unfortunate. I agree, Chris. I want them to move forward thinking about possibilities, not just how do we prevent cheating. Yeah. Tamara,
cheating can be done in so many ways. It's not only AI.
Yeah, that's true. You can just buy papers online at this point. Like, you don't need to use the AI. Tamar, did you have your hand up?
It was a mistake. I was agreeing with what you were just pointing to, and also our colleagues, the past two comments as well. And also as far as cheating, it's like that same rigidity applies to one's conception of what cheating is, which is what Sarah was just alluding to as well. And it takes a little bit of grappling with to see beyond a very specific understanding. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. And I also want to point out, and I'll go to the next hand. In the previous iteration of this webinar, I went more deeply into like what AI is, how it works, and things like that. So if you do want to get another video more about like how AI is working, check out the previous AI webinar I did. Now, let's go to the next hand. Manisha?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, thank you. So I am pursuing my MA in English literature right now. So it just makes me wonder, what is the scope of AI in the field of English literature? Because we all know that my field is, entirely about, a person's opinion, a person's interpretation. So how should I, at this, point, be dealing with AI? Should I just take it as a separate resource by way of reference, or inculcate it in my assignments? And if I do that, how do I do that? Because I'm not sure if I'm violating any ethical codes in that sense.
Yeah.
What's the scope in my field is what I'm trying to think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't have answers for you, but I have suggestions. And that is, I think it's so important for faculty in the same field to get together and talk about these ideas and how they're going to go about using it, right? And how they're going, what the future of their field is. I'm finding for text generators that it works beautifully as like a writing tutor or a writing calculator, where you can put in a completed work and then having it give out bullet points of suggestions for the student. I find that that is really helpful. And then having the student report all of that, and then how they rewrote their original work based on the suggestions and why the AI made those suggestions. And I think those type of things reduce cheating as well, because they know they're going to have to give you something from the AI already. It's going to be hard for them to say, AI, write this paper, now give suggestions for this paper. And they would probably still do it. I'm sure the students are very creative. But I do think that it will be used, kind of like Sarah said. It's going to be something that's just in our lives moving forward, just kind of like how Google became its own term, and at first we were all freaking out about Google. Then maybe I'm telling how old I am, but I think that how we want to integrate it into our classes, we're still in the figuring that out phase. So don't feel that you're behind either, because I think everyone's kind of figuring it out. Corporations are even trying to figure out, when they're doing hiring, a lot of AIs are making their resumes, right? They're doing their whole LinkedIn profiles, and the companies are freaking out, going, who's actually qualified? Because their old ways of assessing these things might have to change. So I don't know. That's not really an answer or anything, but
I get that.
Questions.
Yeah, I do have another question. So at the very beginning of the workshop, I asked whether Zotero would be considered an AI tool, and you said no, you wouldn't agree with it. So why would you say that? Because after all, I'm asking another party to say do my work, or say perhaps to cite a particular reference. So it's still backing on a third source, right? So why would that not be an AI? What would you think?
Yeah, so I think the difference is that so a tool like Zotero can only go off of what you put in it, right? You have to put in the author, you have to put in the title, you have to put in the PDF or whatever, and then it can arrange it for you and spit it back out, but it can't generate things on its own. It's not going to be able to generate a summary of the article for you. It's not going to be able to it's not even going to be able to check to see if you put in the right information for the article, right? So it lacks those skills. But if you put in the information into, for instance, ChatGPT, and say, here's the title, here's the author, here's the date, give me the APA citation for this, it can do that. And if you turn on the web option, it can check and make sure your citation is correct. So I think that's kind of the difference, is that Zotero isn't creating on its own. It's only working with what you give it. And it has very specific parameters, right? but AI is a generalist that can pull information from different places, can create things for you. And so I think that's the big difference. And also, just like Zotero's not as smart. It just can't. It's not based on learning that it's going to do that. As of now, I would love to see an AI in Zotero that can do those things, right? That can pull the citations for me. But because those are some of the repetitive tasks, and I'm not saying like it like summarizes all of it and everything, but I would love to see the repetitive tasks that academics have to deal with taken away so we can focus more on the actual research and the thinking. Like, for instance, if I don't have to spend 2 hours going through and double checking all my references and making sure everything looks completely right, I can use that 2 hours to make sure my arguments are better and stuff like that. So I would support that. I don't think it's there yet, but I think we will see it in the next few years. Okay, I had a question. Can we talk about CGU's policies?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. What needs to be done at the university level? So as of now, what I'm aware of is that CGU doesn't have a specific AI policy. I think they are still working with the general plagiarism and academic integrity policy that they've recently had. I know that they're working on a new one. I know they're working on a new policy. What needs to be done at the university level? I actually want, this is what I want, right? My opinion, I think universities need to leave the AI discussions up to individual faculty, because different classes and different fields are going to have different needs. So I think that, for instance, having a few suggested policies that faculty can use could be useful. But I always caution faculty in just grabbing what's there and putting it in without reflecting on how it actually works in their own class. But I really think it needs to be up to the faculty on how these things are handled, just because, someone who's learning coding does not have the same needs as someone who's learning religious studies. And I think that the faculty should decide what those needs are. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Or do we have any other questions? All right, I have taken everyone's time over 1 o'clock. I just realized. Thank you all for the great conversation. I hope this was helpful. And I just want to iterate, if you ever want to have this conversation with me, you can make an appointment with us or email me directly. We're always happy to talk about AI. We're always happy to design some assignments for your particular class or help you design a statement for your class. So look us up, reach out. We're here for you. And our next webinar is coming up, so also take a look at our events page and keep an eye out for that. Yeah, I hope that graduate students especially are watching this webinar and thinking about how this applies to them, right? Not just those that are planning to go on to be faculty, but also thinking deeply about how they use AI themselves and about some of the pros and cons, and maybe potentially, making suggestions to their faculty. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to let everyone go. Thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, and hope to see you at the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby.
Thank you. Bye.